Good afternoon, Year 9. Welcome back after half term. I hope you got to enjoy some of the sunny weather, even if you couldn't see all your mates in person. You at least got out. And I imagine you're sitting there all, I can picture all your faces looking back at me all brown. I know mine is probably sunburnt. Anyway, much ado about nothing. What can you remember about the play you watched before half term? Write down the names of any characters that you can remember. So scribble down anything that you can remember about what happened and make a list of all the characters that you can remember. That's 5 minutes, then on to the next slide. Our learning objective is today is we're going to go over the whole play in one lesson to sort of re-cement the plot in our minds. It's called a whoosh. I'll explain a bit more about that in a minute. So the title is Whoosh, Much Ado About Nothing in One Lesson. Here are the characters. Stop the PowerPoint or the video here and write down this list of characters under the title. 2 minutes to do that. Before half term, you're asked to watch the Royal Shakespeare Company production of Much Ado About Nothing. Today we're going to recap the key plot details in what's called a whoosh reading. If we were in a classroom, you'd be sat in a circle and people would get up to represent the different characters in the story. The word whoosh is used to make a change in time or scenery, or just empty the stage from all the people that have ended up there. Instead, all you've got to do is sit back and enjoy the reminders of the story. You've written down the names of the key characters, but for the most part, if you want to make some notes on some of the more complex parts of the plots, feel free, but really just make sure you pay close attention to this. I mean, you've seen it, so you should have a good grasp of the plot. It is quite a complex plot, to be fair. So we're going to go over it again. I'm going to read it, and you're going to make notes if you want to. If not, just listen to it. The version you set, in the version you watched, the story was set just after the First World War, but really Shakespeare's story took place in Renaissance Italy, in Messina, more specifically in Sicily. Okay, once there was a rich and famous governor of Messina called Leonato. He had a virtuous daughter called Hero and a feisty niece called Beatrice. They were waiting for their friends who were in the army to return from a war. The soldiers arrive. They are led by Don Pedro, a brave and noble gentleman, closely followed by his illegitimate brother Don John, a nasty man, and two very fit young bachelors called Benedict and Claudio. Everyone is welcomed by Leonato. Beatrice and Benedict, who already know and dislike each other, immediately start to wind each other up. Beatrice: I wonder why you are talking, Signor Benedict. Nobody marked you. Benedict: What, my lady Disdain, are you yet living? They seem to be being very rude to each other. Meanwhile, Claudio had his eye on Hero. She was gorgeous. He had fallen deeply in love. Then Leonato jumped up and said it was time for a party, and everybody cried, "Hooray!" As everybody left for the party, Claudio drew Benedict and Don Pedro aside. Claudio admits that he had fallen in love with Hero. Benedict thinks that he is a fool, but Don Pedro offers to help him with a cunning plan. I will assume they part in some disguise and tell fair Hero I am Claudio, and in her bosom I'll unclasp my heart, then she shall be thine. Now, hidden from view was Borachio, a faithful servant to Don John, boo hiss, the nasty man Don John. Borachio was a sneaky man who would do anything to get in with his master. When Don John heard the news that Claudio fancied Hero and was going to get help from his brother Don Pedro, he vowed to make trouble. If I can cross him in any way, I bless myself in every way. Whoosh! Everybody rushes off and sits back down and other people come out. Inside Leonato's house, all the guests were getting ready for the party. Each person puts on a mask so that nobody knew who anybody else was. Lots of dancing and people not recognising each other. It's slightly unbelievable that a little mask would stop you recognising someone, but that's what happened. As promised, Don Pedro, wearing his mask, approached Hero for a dance. He bowed and she curtsied and they danced. Then Benedict approached Beatrice for a dance. She recognises him and winds him up, pretending that she doesn't know who he is. Knowing full well she is speaking to Benedict, she asks, "Do you know Benedict, the prince's jester? He's such a very dull fool," which makes Benedict furious, although he can't admit it without ruining his disguise. Meanwhile, Don John, boo, approached Claudio. Pretending he did not know who Claudio was, he whispered into his ear that Don Pedro was in love with Hero, and he swore he would marry her tonight. Then he went off again. Claudio immediately thinks the worst of Don Pedro, his friend. Friendship is constant in all things except in the affairs of love. He is convinced that he has been set up by Don Pedro and gets himself into a right strop. Benedict tells him that this is nonsense. Fortunately, Don Pedro has worked his magic, calls Hero and Claudio together with Leonato Hero's father. The marriage is agreed and everyone is overjoyed. Hooray! In the spirit of the moment, Don Pedro gets carried away as a matchmaker and vows that within the week he will make Beatrice and Benedict fall in love with each other. Everyone agrees to help. Meanwhile, Don John was fed up with his plan not working, but Borachio has another idea. He tells Don John that he has been wooing, which just means sort of chatting up, Hero's servant Margaret, and that she will do anything for him. For 1,000 ducats, that's money, he will persuade Margaret to dress up as Hero and then woo her that night. Claudio and Don Pedro will be told. They will see the lovemaking and believe that it was the real Hero being unfaithful behind Claudio's back. Whoosh! All change. Next day, Benedict was in the orchard muttering and moaning to himself about love. Suddenly he heard someone coming and quickly he hid himself behind a convenient bush. In came Don Pedro, Leonato and Claudio. They saw Benedict hiding and decided to put Don Pedro's plan into action. Speaking loudly so that Benedict could hear, Don Pedro said to Leonato, "What was it you told me of today? That your niece Beatrice was in love with Signor Benedict?" Leonato replied in a voice loud enough for Benedict to hear clearly, "She loves him with an enraged affection." Then the three of them walked away, laughing under their breath to find Beatrice. Benedict popped out from behind the bush and he scratched his head. Then he whooped out loud at the thought of marrying Beatrice. "I will be horribly in love with her," he said. Whoosh! All change again. After dinner, it was Hero's turn to trick Beatrice into falling in love with Benedict. She and her servants, Margaret and Ursula, make sure that Beatrice, who was sitting nearby, can overhear their conversation. Margaret talks about Benedict's excellent qualities, and Ursula asks Hero, "Are you sure that Benedict loves Beatrice so entirely?" Hero loudly agrees and adds that Beatrice would not be interested as she is too hard-hearted. Hero and her servants go off, giggling. Beatrice stands up. She cannot believe her ears. Ashamed that her friends thought so little of her, she vows, "Benedict, I love on. I will tame my wild heart to thy loving hand." Whoosh! All change again. That night, Don John and Borachio put their wicked plan into action. They got Margaret to stand on Hero's balcony with Borachio kneeling below her. Don John persuades Don Pedro and Claudio to watch. In horror, they watch Borachio calling Hero sweet Hero, and in the half-light they believe they see Hero blowing kisses back to Borachio. Claudio, we already know how jealous he can be, swears that not only will he no longer marry her, but he would reveal that she was a tart and in public in church on their wedding day. That's nice. Borachio, now 1,000 ducats richer, gets drunk and struts around Messina boasting of his villainy. Two passing policemen, Dogberry and Verges, overhear his story and arrest him. Whoosh! All change again. Next morning at 5 a.m, Hero is getting into her wedding dress. She looks gorgeous. She has no idea about what is to come. Meanwhile, Dogberry and Verges go to speak to Leonato about the villain that they have apprehended. Leonato is in a terrible rush. He has his daughter's wedding to get to and refuses to hear their story. He tells them to interview the criminal and come back to him with the full details. That's where they're going to get married. Looks lovely, doesn't it? At the chapel, all are gathered for the wedding. The friar is ready to do the service and Claudio and Hero stand before him. Just as the friar gets to the part where he asks if there is any reason why the two should not be married, Claudio turns to Leonato and cries, "Give not this rotten orange to your friend," and he flings Hero back to her father, accusing her of being soiled. Leonato is as shocked as his daughter at the accusation. He turns to Don Pedro, his friend. Don Pedro replies, "Myself, my brother, and this grieved count did see her, hear her, at that hour last night, talk with a ruffian at her chamber window." Hero shakes her head in shock. She turns to her father. He pushes her away. Then she faints. Claudio storms out of the chapel, closely followed by the Dons. Suddenly the friar steps forward. He believes that Hero is innocent. He suggests that they tell everyone that Hero has died of shame, convinced that the news will make Claudio full of remorse. Everyone goes, but leaving Beatrice and Benedict alone. At last Benedict declares his love for Beatrice. I do love nothing in the world so well as you. And Beatrice replies, I love you with so much of my heart that none is left to protest. Gorgeous, isn't it? Benedict, caught up in the romantic moment, sighs, come, bid me do anything for you. Beatrice looks him straight in the eyes and commands him to kill Claudio. Despite this shock, Benedict nods his agreement. He will challenge Claudio to a duel. Whoosh, all change again. Later that day, Leonato meets up with Don Pedro and Claudio and tells them that their slander has killed his innocent daughter. I say thou hast belied mine innocent child. Thy slander hath gone through and through her heart. She lies buried with her ancestors. Then in comes Benedict, who draws his sword. Quietly he challenges Claudio. You are a villain. I jest not. You have killed a sweet lady, and her death shall fall heavy on you. Then to top it all, in comes Dogberry and Verges with their prisoner Baracchio. They fling him to his knees before Leonato, and he whimpers his confession. Claudio realises what an awful mistake they have made. He goes down on his knees before Leonato's and begs, choose your revenge yourself. Leonato tells him that he must first write a speech to clear Hero's name and speak it at her tomb that night. Then, tomorrow morning, he must marry Hero's cousin to restore the family honour. Whoosh, all change again. It's the family tomb. Very beautiful as well, isn't it? That night, the family tomb is dressed for Hero's funeral. Claudio and Don Pedro and their attendants slowly process in mourning around the tomb. Claudio sings, so the life that died with shame lives in death with glorious fame. Hang thou there upon the tomb, praising her when I am dumb. Whoosh, all change. The following morning there is another wedding. This time Claudio will marry a woman he has never seen before. Benedict asks Leonato to marry Beatrice at the same time. A double wedding, hooray! Then two brides wearing veils step forward. Claudio asks which one is his. She throws back a veil and reveals herself to be Hero. Claudio is overjoyed. Leonato declares, she died, my lord, but while her slander lived. She died, my lord, but while her slander lived. Now Benedict steps forward and takes Beatrice by the hand. Both couples marry. News then reaches the congregation that Don John has been captured. Benedict asks that everyone doesn't think about him until tomorrow. Tonight is a time for celebration and, you can't guess, dancing. Okay, there you go. Stop it in places if you want. It is a complex plot, but that's the whole thing. Right, how much can you remember? Write down as many characters as you can remember. Write down the connections between the characters, e.g. daughter of, engaged to. That's a difficult one at this stage. Add details of what happens to each of the characters. Here we are, is a nice representation of